So for unit 5, we're going to dive into a new type of neural network called convolutional neural network. These are, and we're going to do image processing. So far, we've really just looked at data as numbers, things like that, maybe a little bit of text, but mainly numbers. And if it were text, we were converting it to numbers. And now we're going to dive into images. And again, we looked a little bit at images, but again, we kind of just treated images as if they were numbers, a bunch of numbers with the digit recognition challenge. So do that. These convolutional neural networks are the first thing we really started seeing what we call deep learning, deep neural networks with lots of parameters. And they really set the stage for what we have now, where we were bringing lots of data, lots of training, and lots of computer power to try to get these to work and getting good results here. So just a quick reminder where we're coming from. So we're still building neural networks based on the neuron of the brain, and we're approximating them where we have a neuron, a node here, and connections, other nodes that are connected to this. Each of the connections has a weight, how efficient that connection is. And these weights are what we change, how we learn here. So we call these the weight or the parameters. And then our neuron here sums up, does a weighted sum of all the inputs here, and then produces some output here. And there's different ways we produce that output, but we generally use now a rectified linear unit, where if the inputs are below 0 or negative, this outputs 0. If it's above above 0, it just outputs that value here. So that's what we're kind of starting with. Now we're going to build on that. In unit 5. So I'm going to go over, yeah.
The discussion in space.
Yes, let me talk about that. Okay, so this week we have this explore activity, and it should actually say, so what happened is I'm moving unit 7 down to unit 5 here. And so there's a couple things that still say unit 7 for this. And let me update that. So the explore activity here, again, is related to computer vision and selecting one of these things, tutorials related to computer vision. So you want to do that. There's a learning notebook, which we'll do on Thursday. We'll walk through this. And the discussion, I mistakenly still had the old unit 5 discussions, which is now the new unit 7 discussions posted. So if you did a discussion on machine learning jobs, you've already done the unit 7 discussion. Okay, so but that doesn't help you. You still have to do this unit 5 discussion. So I flopped them. So when you get to unit 7, you'll be good to go there. Okay, so that's the 2 are been renamed. And I thought I linked them in here. I thought I deleted this link, and I apparently relinked the old one back in here. My mistake. So this is the one you want to do for now. Again, find anything related to image recognition, convolutional neural networks, things like that. For things. So I'm going to take out one thing. Before, I was asking you not to do image generation stuff, but I'm going to leave that as a possibility here, because there's some really interesting news and stuff in those areas. So, okay. So we're going to go up and do this stuff. And again, this is on odd week, so you don't have a project due this week. I will open up the project soon, but again, I'm still updating the project, and I'm updating the learning activity with some of the newest stuff out there. So those should be available, well, by Thursday, certainly. So I'm gonna go into this convolutional neural network and walk through this stuff. One of my favorite places to learn about new stuff, because again, a lot of this is new to me also over time, is MIT's course. They have a course called S191, 6.S191, and they update it regularly there. And you can actually kind of register it and take it online free or paid there, but they just post all their videos to YouTube also here. And so this is the version where from a couple years ago, where they were talking about a good introduction to convolutional neural networks here. So I'm not going to play all this. I'm just going to show you what this is going to be like. There's my volume here.
We're largely going to be focused on deep learning for computer vision. So to motivate, I think we can all agree that vision is one of the most important human senses. Sighted people rely on vision quite a lot for everything from navigating in the world to recognizing and manipulating objects to interpreting facial expressions and understanding emotions. And I think it's safe to say that for all of us, vision is a huge part of our lives. And that's
so again, this is a good video, walks you through, talks about learning these features, talks about extracting convolutional neural networks here, how this works for this. Again, one of the issues here is that these MIT courses tend to assume you've had like linear algebra and of course, calc and stuff like that. They have a little bit of that, but this one I think is quite there's very little math I think in it, so I think you can read through this. I really strongly suggest you watch this. It's only 41 minutes long for that. So when you're doing something, just pop this in, and I've been watching these on my treadmill or whatever you do. So I really recommend this video as a good place to start. I'll just mention, maybe here, let me bring that back.
So thank you all for coming to day 2 of the CCNs.
And that's day 2 of their course. Week 5 of our course, and that's from 2019. So, this, if you actually search for this S191, they have the full playlist, and they adapt this course every year in the same way like I kind of do. They shift this course to the newest topics. So this year it's much more focused on large language models and the current state, including robotics. And again, so I'm trying to pull a lot of my stuff from here also. So, but again, you can actually look at the 2023 stuff is all posted in here, and you can watch those videos too. So is the 2022 stuff. And again, we're watching the 2019 stuff. And again, some of this has been updated and some of it. So like convolutional neural networks, it's still in this course because again, they covered it they cover it every year. So they covered it again in 2020. They have a lecture on it that you can watch, very similar to the other one. They covered it in 2022. And in 2023, they have it also on as their as their 3rd lecture, I think that year. So again, that's so those are some good lectures out there if you're looking for stuff to watch. Okay, but let's talk about what are these convolutional neural networks and where are we coming from with this stuff. So again, we're going to try to use the brain as an inspiration for our vision systems and look a little bit at how the brain works. Window. So how much brain anatomy do you cover in your science classes? In high school science class, maybe you covered some of it sometime, maybe not, depending on where you were. So, for humans, again, we have our brain here. Our eyes are feeding back, and it's kind of interesting, but the retina of your eyes, you know, you're detecting light through your eyes, and then that is actually sent through to the very back of your head. The visual cortex is way in the back of your head. So those your rods and cones that are in your eyes are connected. Those impulses go to the very back of your head, an area called generally V1 for vision one, the first vision layer for this system. And then we build it up into more, we start with very primitive detection of things, and we detect more complicated like features as we go up. And so there's V1, V2, V3, V4, kind of different layers. And again, some of the different names of them, I'm just kind of simplifying it here. But just to kind of show you an example, your brain, these neurons like in V1 and V2 are set to detect certain things. So one set of neurons are simply to detect kind of lines in your image, kind of like an edge detection, you might call it here, and at a certain orientation. Like this shows an orientation, this box, where it's looking for light in the plus section that's dark on both sides here. So this light pattern here, the yellow light pattern here, is not matching the correct orientation. So in A here, this would not be active. But if we're seeing an image with a bright line here and dark on both sides, and it's the right orientation, then this field, this area, these neurons would become active for this stuff. So again, we have sets of cells, and again, yes, that detect light at certain angles, lines at certain angles, and more complicated ones then the next layer will detect light at certain angles that is moving in a certain direction here. The great story about some of the researchers who were doing this originally, this is the time they were doing research with monkeys, and they had a monkey there, and they had little small pins going into the neurons of this monkey, and they are trying to figure out what different parts of the brain, what different neurons of this individual cortex did different things. And they could sense certain ones, like this one area they could detect, oh, this is at one angle, and if you move over, it's a slightly different angle, move over, it's a slightly different angle. But then they went up, and there's this one whole area they had no idea what they were trying to show the monkey different pictures, different things, and they had an overhead projector. I don't know if you ever, did you ever have teachers that used the old overhead projectors with the slides on it? And so they'd take a picture of a monkey, of like an elephant, and put it on there, and see and move it around to different locations to see, and they'd slide off, and they'd try a different picture of a different thing, color, no color, and they kept trying for days and days trying to get something to register for this. And then they started getting lazy and not just dropping it down, but they slid the slide, across the image, and the neurons became very active with this line moving across the page, and they realized that it wasn't detecting static things, it was detecting moving lines at a certain angle there. And then once they kind of understood that, they could increase their search and find this sort of stuff. So again, there are portions of your visual cortex where we have whole areas that recognize lines in different areas. So again, we map your retina onto a bunch of cells, and then those cells We have some that recognize like a flat line, some recognize vertical lines, but some recognize only lines at certain angles here. And again, we have some tied to your left eye and some tied to your right eye. And we've been able to map out this whole method of how this vision system works here. And then we're trying to build more complex features out of this. But again, that's kind of our basis that we thought we recognize little features, and then we're going to build more complex features out of that. Should have set these up to open up in a new window. For this. So here's our basic structure of a convolutional neural network. We're going to take an image. We're going to recognize some basic features. We're then going to try to recognize more advanced features, and then recognize more advanced features from that. And the assumption is that as you're going up to more advanced features, you're putting together smaller features into a bigger feature. So there'll be less on in your screen or on the image at a time. So like if you're trying to recognize a face and it's made up of different edges at different angles there, you might have lots of little edges on your screen, but only a couple faces on your screen. You might have 1,000 edges on your scene, but you're not going to have 1,000 faces that you're going to recognize on your scene. Maybe you're going to have 100 at most faces, or maybe 10 faces on your screen. So the idea is that at the low level, where we're just recognizing low number of simple features, we'll have lots of them. But as we go up, we'll kind of shrink the image down, so we won't necessarily have as many features, as many of these complicated features as we do the simple features. So we kind of shrink our image down, and then at the end, we then generally try to categorize this. At least that's one thing we'll do a lot, is just classify this image, saying it's a boat or an airplane or something else for this. But this kind of shows the type of features we might be recognizing. We might start with some basic lines or something like that and build more complicated features up and build more and more complicated features until maybe we're trying to recognize like almost faces or things like that. And again, we apply the same features to everywhere in the image. So like we're looking for this sort of pattern. At least one layer will be looking for this sort of pattern everywhere in our image. And they're trying to show this dynamically. This is, the math behind it is different, but at least this is kind of an idea, is where we're looking for these features everywhere in our image. And so one layer might be looking for this feature, another layer might be. So what we're going to have is we're going to have a whole bunch of these filters or feature detectors on our image, and we're going to look at them. And each filter or feature detector will be detecting a different type of model or a different type of feature. And again, this article goes over the same thing, where we're going back to V1. V1 detects simple things like edges and lines. That moves up to V2, where we're detecting more like shapes here, like circles or squares or something like that, ovals. And then moving up to like V4, we're doing more like objects, like an eye or an nose or an ear. And then up to this IT field, where we're actually detecting faces. So again, we knew the human, the visual cortex starts with simple features and builds them up to more complicated features. So that's what we're trying to do with this sort of idea here. This is an interesting picture here that shows how this works. We can actually take it. So you don't recognize you're doing this. You don't recognize when you see, like, if you see this panda, you just see a panda. You're not conscious of all the work it gets to get to panda. You just know that panda is the end result. The rest, most of your visual recognition stuff is subconscious here. And so we can actually trick your vision system in different ways. We can put in noise in this system to trick a computer that recognizes these features. So we can actually trick a computer a little bit. So although we're mimicking the brain, we're not mimicking it as well as humans do, or at least we understand it better so we can develop trick stuff. So one thing we can do is we can take an image like this, we can put in special noise and generate an image like this, but our computer is going to think that this is a monkey and not a panda here for this because of the noise. We'll look at this later when we get to art and image generation and things like that, because we are now using these sorts of systems. Artists can put their, if they want to put their image or, their painting or stuff online, they can apply noise to that image so that to a human it looks fine, but it will corrupt it from a vision point of view. So a lot of artists who had, who are concerned that their art is being stolen by AI online now have a weapon to fight this stuff. So we'll look at that later on. This isn't actually talking about this, but it's just a related thing I wanted to point out. So, okay, let's go. So this again, more on these features and how we're trying to visualize it. And basically it's trying to look for faces anywhere in our page, or eyes or ears, or, any sort of features anywhere in our image, and trying to figure out where these objects are for this. How does this all work from a neural network point of view here? So we're going to jump down here to this, talk about image kernels. And I love this visualization from Victor Powell here. So we're going to start just with grayscale images. So what is a grayscale image? It means there's pixels on our image are made up, and everyone is made up of amount of gray from 0 to 255 there. So we use that ratio for our pixels. So if we look at this image, dark pixels will be very few. So like this is 40. And again, you can see the red dot on the right side of the image, and then you can see the actual value on the left side. So again, it's kind of hard to read somebody like this dark one, that's 30 something, 33 here, where a bright pixel like this one is 254 here, 255. So if it's basically white, it's 250. So that's how our images are made, at least our grayscale images, right? I think you knew that already, right? So, but we have this two-dimensional array or vector of numbers, and now we're going to apply filters to it. And originally we just manually created these filters for this. I don't know if you've applied, so this is like primitive filters. This isn't like social media filters where we're adding a hat to a person. We're just doing more like edge detection or something like that. And so I don't know if you've done image processing where you've just done edge detection or something like that, embossed an image. There used to be a program called Photoshop where we'd actually run it here, and in Photoshop we could just do edge detection to apply these filters to this image here. So here's one of the filters out there called a sharpen filter here, and it's a 3x3 filter. here, and we're going to apply it. So it is going to increase the strength of the center pixel and decrease all the adjacent pixels here. So what it's going to do, and let me move back here, and I'm going to, so I can move this filter around to different spots of the screen here, and it will show me that calculation here. I'm going to move this up a little bit, and I'm going to shrink it down just a little bit so you can get it all on the screen at once. So on the left, the input image, you can see my grid. And again, I can move that around to different locations. But I'm just going to stick it in one location here. So there, and I'm going to apply the filter, the 3x3 filter, that input image on the left, and it's going to generate a single pixel, which is shown on the right. And how is it going to do? We're going to apply the filter at the top. So I have 3x3 input image, and there's just values in there. So like the upper left-hand corner is 156 because it's kind of gray. It's brighter, but not dark. The one below it is darker, so it's 103, and the one below that is darker even more at 81. So you can see this. So this pixel is 156. This pixel is 103. This pixel is darker is 81. So this grid here is shown by these actual pixel values here. You can see this is the darkest one, 81. So once we have those taken out, we then take this and apply it to that. So we're going to apply each of our values. So, oops, let's go back to that. If you look at our filter at the top, the first top left corner is 0. So we're going to multiply 156 times 0. Going down, it's a -1. So we take 103 times -1. Going down, the next one is 0. So it's 81 times 0. We do this for all 9 pixels, multiplying the corresponding spot in our filter by the, so like the most important is the center one, 134 times 5 there. And so we apply that to all the different values and we get one result, 149. And so that's a gray scale level. So we can put that in our new image. So we take a 3x3 area and we put it and we generate 1 pixel from it. And again, we're going to start at the upper left-hand corner, and we're going to do that pixel. And we're going to move over 1, do that pixel, move over 1, and do that. So we will step over a little bit at a time here. So that our stride length, how much we step over, is generally going to be 1, although later on we'll see it. We'll see other stride lengths often of 2 here. So again, you can see as I step over each one, you can see the right side dot moving each time here. So again, this is one filter. And again, we spent years designing these filters manually here. We don't use them anymore. But people have filters named after themselves because that was so important. So like the left Sobel filter looks at lights. And so again, this is looking for places like this where it's brighter on the left side and darker on the right side here. And it outputs a bright line there. So you can see where I have my filter on the left image, you see there, and on the right image, it's real bright. But in places where it's all the same, it comes out to nothing, to 0 here, these values. So now, sometimes we get a negative value from these filters. So if we get a negative value, again, grayscale has to be at 0 or higher. So we just reset it to 0 here. Sometimes we'll get a value more than 255. Let's see if I can find one that's more than, like this one is 432. That's more than the max. So again, we rescale it. It's we max it out at 255 here. Can't get any more brighter white than that for that. So again, we can select these different filters, and these filters kind of detect different features in our image in different ways for this. So this is what's called the emboss filter. And again, we can do a top Sorbel filter, which will want to look at lines that are bright on the top and dark below it. Okay, so we have these filters. We knew about those for years and we designed them. In fact, when I learned to do face recognition, our assignment in class was to design filters here and to figure out what kind of filters like this would be designed. And there's some whole area called HAR, book named after HAR, H-A-R, filters for facial recognition, whole set designed to recognize faces that were pre-programmed in there. And early in my teaching career, I'd have students use these HAR filters to try to develop and do facial recognition. But so we had this idea of applying filters here and working with the different filters for a while. And again, sometimes these are called filters, sometimes they're called kernels. Here's another name for these. So again, here's a simple edge detection filter. So the Sobel-Feldman one here, and shows like here's an image, here's the filtered version of the image, and all the details of this particular filter. And again, early systems are trying to code these in, these filtering mechanisms in. So let's go back here and let's talk about these two. I mentioned stride. I want to also talk about padding a little bit. Let me go back to this visualization here. So the two terms we want to talk about is stride. So if I have the filter applied here and I want to move it to the right, how many pixels do I want to move it to the right? I could just move it 1 pixel and 1 pixel. If I move it 1 pixel at a time, and that's what this image is, my resulting image is about the same size as my starting image. So here, if instead I take this and I move it like 3, so I go here and I move it here, this is 3 over, and then 3 over, then my resulting image would be 1/3 of the size of it. So for every 3 pixels on the left image, I get 1 pixel on the right image here. We will often use a stride of 2 when we want to resize an image. We'll apply our filter and we'll move over 2 and apply our filter again over 2. And again, same down. When we go down, we'll shift down 2. And that'll shrink our image in half, kind of by the width and length. So if we have an image that's 1,000 pixels by 1,000 pixels, and we do this stride of 2, we'll end up with a 500 by 500 pixel image. So for every 2 pixels, we'll get 1. So that's the stride. The other is the buffer. What do we do when we get up to this corner here and we can't, how do we handle the corner where we want our filter to go beyond the edge of the image? So a lot of times what we'll do is we'll just, we might extend the image as just white or as just black, or just copy the last value over, or in our, we might just make our image smaller. So if this is a pixel, we'll lose 1 pixel on the left side, 1 pixel on the right side, 1 pixel on the top and a bottom of our image. So if we have an image that's 1,000 by 1,000, and we apply this with the stride of 1, the next one will be 998. So we'll lose 2 pixels, which may not seem important, but again, we'll run into some issues with that. So, well, that's called the padding, is how you deal with the edges here. Okay. So let's try to dive deep. I'm going to go into this explanation of convolutional neural networks here. And again, this is used today a lot to just try to describe or categorize images, describe images, highlight objects in images. So like this is showing that we're 99% sure that this inside this box is a dog, and this is a car, and this is a horse here. And we'll look at different ways of doing this. But initially, we're just going to do classification, where we just look at an image and put in one of a couple of classifications. So this started with the digit recognition challenge, which we've already kind of been looking at, those simple digits. Why? Well, the Postal Service wanted to automate zip code readings on their envelopes. This was back in the old days where people wrote mail, and we wrote on envelopes and we put a zip code on them. And humans would process them, and the government, the post office would say, it would be nice if we had a computer that could process these digits. And so there was a lot of money funding that, and it turned out to be surprisingly hard. No one could do it very well until the 1990s, when we had Linette's architecture. Jan Kuhn came up with this architecture about 1990 here. And it just changed, it just basically created this whole area here. So the idea is that we start with an image. It might be a black and white or a color image. And we do what we call a convolutional layer. So we'll take filters and apply filters. And again, we apply them over and over to this image here. And we'll generate a new image of that applied filter. In the same way, like we are applying a filter here. So like this is the sharpen, this is our original image, and this is our new, the right side is one of our new images. But we can apply different filters. So we could switch to another filter, which will detect different things, and we could switch to another filter. So we'll apply multiple filters here, and we'll get multiple layers of images. So this is showing that we're starting with this one image, and we're ending up with three different filters. And often we might generate 12 or 20 layers or 50 different features. So what we'll do is we'll apply different features to this. Now, one of the interesting things is that here, rather than fixed filters, we'll do this in a neural network. So each of these values here, like this, let's go back to this one, this -1, -2, 1, these values will be in the neural network, and we'll learn those. So we're not going to preset the filters. We will have the neural network learn the filters at every layer here. So we will learn these filters on this layer. Now we'll detect a bunch of edges or things like that at this first one. And now we will shrink this image down in what we call a pooling layer here. So we'll take an image of this size and we'll shrink it to half its size here. And the idea again is that if we're detecting features, we don't need as many pixels for those features, because there'll be less of the more complicated features on the screen or on the filter. So, and we use something called max pooling, where basically we look at an area and say, if any of these pixels detected a feature, this feature here, we're going to bring it down to this layer. Then we'll do this again. So now we start off, we had 3 layers. We still have 3 feature layers here in the picture. We'll do a convolutional layer here. And again, we'll detect a bunch of other features here. And again, maybe we'll detect more features now here. So maybe we'll detect, I don't know, 6, 7 features here. And then we'll do a max pooling layer where we'll shrink it down some. And then eventually we get to where we want to do a classification, and we'll use our fully connected or dense layers at the end. So we'll take our final feature maps and we'll feed that into what we kind of call a traditional neural network, often 1 or 2 layers of fully connection. That's what we were doing this last week, where you're just doing your layers there. So this is kind of like a normal 2 hidden layer neural network. So basically these feature detectors are the input into a normal neural network, and the output is a classification. Here we're trying to decide if it's a picture of a dog, a cat, a bird, or a boat here for this. So again, we're feeding it through here. At every layer of these convolutional layers, we have multiple filtered versions of our image here. And in reality, we're showing one image here, uncolor image, but you know that we don't store color. I mean, there's no such thing as a color image stored on the computer, right? Our color image is made up of 3 layers, a red, a green, and a blue layer, right? We have our RGB. Well, commonly, that's how we encode this. So this one is actually 3 layers, and we apply our filters to those 3 layers, and we go here, and then we apply our filters to these layers. So all of our layers, every area here will have multiple layers, kind of multiple copies of our image showing different features. In the same way here, we can look at like this version on the right of it, and I can switch to a different version. I can switch to a different version, and I can switch different, so I can have different features that I'm detecting from the same image. That's what we're kind of trying to set up here. And so we have 3 basic kinds of layers. Our convolutional layer, which is always mixed with our rectified linear unit, our non-linear stuff. This article is kind of older and shows them separate, but now they're always just linked together. We have pooling layers, sometimes called the subsampling layers, where we'll shrink our image down here, and then we'll have our classification layer here. And these are generally fully connected layers. So again, this is trying to show you how a convolutional step works. We'll take an image, again, so our image is made up of pixel values here. We'll take our image and we'll have a filter, a matrix, a kernel, whatever you want to call it, that we're going to apply. They're usually 3 by 3. They don't have to be 3 by 3, but they're usually 3 by 3. So we'll apply this 3 by 3 filter to this, and this kind of shows you a little animation of how that filter is applied again and again to this image to get a new image. Now, it's not the same size. We go from a 5 by 5 image to a 3 by 3 image, and that's because of the padding and the borders. So if we want to make it the same size, we would have to maybe add a band around this stuff or do some sort of padding around it. In fact, if we look at this one, you see they just added a black box basically around the whole image, so it's the same size as this. So that's how they handled that. It looks like we're shrinking the image, but again, that's just because we're dealing with such small images. We're just losing 2 pixels. So like we're going from 1,000 pixels to 998, which isn't a big deal when you're at 1,000 pixels, but when you're at 5 pixels and you're going to 3 pixels, it shows up more, okay? But generally, when we apply this filter, it only shrinks the image a little bit and we can pad it out there. But you can see how it applies this filter, and then it shifts. And notice the step it shifts over is only one. We shift over one there. So that's our convolutional layer. So do you guys, is this making any sense? Kind of understanding how these filters apply to these convolutional layers? So again, sometimes it'll take you a while. You might want to watch this video, you watch these, read, you can actually read these articles. And again, the MIT article goes through a different explanation of it, and they have different graphics. I find the MIT one very helpful. Okay, so we've got this here. That's our convolutional layer. The next type of layer is a pooling or subsampling layer, where we're going to shrink it down. And again, that is going to shrink our image down from a big size to a smaller size here. So how are we going to do that? So again, they're talking about some filters here. Yeah, they're applying it. Oh yeah, before we get there, let's talk about, I think we've talked about this. So the depth is how many filters we're applying it on. And the stride is how much we're stepping over. And the padding, we can actually set the padding around the edge to see how we're going to handle the edge stuff. The different ways of doing it. And again, we're using this rectified linear unit, the same thing we used before with our traditional unit. We're summing up all our values and it goes through this rectified linear unit to get an output. Okay, now we get to the pooling step here. And here we're applying, it's kind of like just a max filter. So we are looking at a 2x2 area and we're applying a filter, which is just picking the biggest of these numbers. So we have in the pink area, we have a 1, a 5, and a 6. Which one's largest? 6 is. So the result is 6. And then we shift over 2 values, and then we do 2, 4, 7, 8. What's the largest? 8. So that's here. And then we're going to shift down 2 and do this yellow one. The largest one is 3. And then over here, the largest one in the blues is 4. So again, we're applying basically like a 2x2 filter, and our stride is 2. So our image here is going to be cut in half. So if it's 1,000 by 1,000 pixel image, it's going to be going down to a 500 by 500 pixel image, because every 4x4 region, we're just getting 1 pixel. I mean, not 4. Every 2x2 region, there we're getting just 1 pixel out of it. So this is our max pooling layer. It just allows, and kind of the logic is this, is that if we're detecting a feature here, like maybe we're doing facial recognition, we're at the layer where we're trying to detect noses and eyes and stuff. And so we are maybe detecting an eye here with the 5 and the 6. And we're thinking, oh, there's probably an eye right around here. And so, but we're detecting one, so we're just going to say that's a 6. Most likely an eye is here. And over here, oh yeah, we're pretty sure there's an eye in this region because there's a 7 and 8. So somewhere down here, there's probably an eye, 7, 8. So again, we just want to know that there's that feature there. So we're picking out the largest value that we're pretty confident that there's an eye there. But down here, I don't think there's any eye features here or here. So those are lower values, 3 or 4. So again, it just, the max, that's the kind of the justification of doing max rather than average. We just want to figure out, is there a feature at that location? Did one of our subregions detect that feature? And if so, we want to bring that one over. And again, we start with our image, we apply it, and then we apply our pooling. Our max pooling, and our image size shrinks in half here. So, and again, this talks about max rather than sum or rather than average, and why we use max a little bit here. So again, often we start with convolution filters, a convolutional layer, a max pooling layer, a convolutional layer, a max pooling layer, and then eventually when they get small enough, we go down into a traditional neural network. Here. So that's our last set of layers, is this fully connected layers. And that's what we've seen. And in Keras, the way I think they're called dense layers there, because densely connected sort of idea, they're fully connected here. Now, one thing we do have to do is we have to go from these images, which are 2 by 2 images, and we have a whole bunch of layers of them, into just a row of images here. So basically, we have to flatten it out into just one long list of values. And so usually in our software, there'll be a layer that'll flatten this out or do something like that so that we can feed this in. So usually this has to be some conversion from our convolutional image layers into our flat network here. And they don't mention it here, but when you actually implement it, you generally see that. So again, this shows our neural network, how it's set up. So you're beginning to understand this. So I don't want to ruin your vision of it. I just want to mention, because at some point this might occur to you and you're going, well, how does that work? So just so you know, we are talking about applying these filters, and it's just a 3 by 3 filter here. So, and there's just 9 numbers for that filter. That's all you need, is 9 numbers, right? But what if you had a color image here, and you're applying it a color image, and there were 3 red, green, blue layers? So what you would do is you'd have this filter replicated 3 times. One for the red, one for the green. So rather than a 2-dimensional filter, it's actually a 3-dimensional filter. So there are 3 layers of colors, and it's a 3 by 3 filter. So when we apply this, this is actually more of a 3 by 3 filter, just so you know. And when we get up here, so like this one where we have 6 different layers, and then we're applying a 3 by 3 filter to 6 different layers, that is actually 3 by 3 by 6. So it is 6 different, the filter goes through and does all of the layers. So it's actually 3-dimensional. You don't really have to worry about that, but I think it's going to bother some of you at some point. Like, how do these filters really work with 3-dimensional layered stuff? And so it does work there, where although we're saying we're simplifying it here, these are actually 3-dimensional filters that are being applied, because it has to apply to each one of these layers. Now, we'll often deal with 3 by 3 filters, but doesn't have to be. You can do 4 by 4, 5 by 5. We like odd filters for the visualization, but you don't have to. And in fact, Google found amazing results with 1 by 1 filters. And you might ask yourself, what in the world is a 1 by 1? How do you apply a 1 by 1 filter? But then you have to remember that we are applying a 1 by 1 filter to all the layers. So it is looking at all the different features, layers, but at a single pixel layer. So for a long time, we've been trying to figure out different layouts of this, and that's what we're going to work on today, is how to detect these different features here. So again, at the beginning layer, we detect like lines and stuff, and then we try to detect more complicated features like eyes and noses and stuff, and then eventually we're just trying to detect faces or something like that. We're trying to build up, and again, that's building on what we know the visual cortex system works up. We're trying to simulate that in different ways. So, okay. If you want to see the current state of this stuff, I included this article here convolutional neural networks for vision neurons. This is a technical article from 2023 that kind of tries to summarize current work in convolutional neural networks and all the stuff that's being done by all the different people out there in different ways here. So if you're really interested in this sort of stuff, this is an interesting summary, though I think it's too advanced for this class. But I just want to point that out if you're interested. That's this article here. And here's the, since it's a scientific, a real article, this is the actual citation for that article. So, okay, so let's try to do some simulations. So if you want to try this out now, you can go into, again, we're in the learning resources. We're going to this convolutional net JS. This is a JavaScript simulator. So we can look at this minced version of it and try to do these convolutions, and you can see the layers here. There's an input layer, there's a convolutional layer, there's a pooling layer, a convolutional layer, a pooling layer, and then what we call a softmax layer here for this. And again, our code will be slightly different than this. Again, you can at least kind of see that it's defining these layers, convolutional layers. And here, the size is the size of the filters. Is it 3 by 3? Some of these are 5 by 5 filters here. How many filters? How many different features? We're going to take 8 different features here. So again, you can see our images here, and then you can see we're detecting 8 different features at that first layer here. And then we set the stride here, and we set the padding. The padding is how we handle the edges, and the stride's hollowing. And then our max pooling layer, those are almost always 2 by 2 with a stride of 2. And that shrinks our image down to our smaller image here. So here's our image. We were at 24 by 24 images, and now we're at 12 by 12 images here. So you can see how our image went from 24 by 24 by 1 layer to now we're detecting 24 by 24 by 8. We're detecting 8 different features in it here. And then we're pooling it. So now we're at 12 by 12 by 8. And now we're doing 16 features here. And our image sizes are shifting down and down. And so again, it's trying to learn to predict these features. And the output, again, is they do a fully connected layer here, a dense layer. And then softmax is just a way of categorizing the output here so that it shows up as a percent there. So you can see like this, let me pause this now that it's been running for a while. Okay. So this output, it's pretty sure that's a 6. So you see the bar here. It could be a 0, slight chance. It could be a 5, but it's pretty sure it's a 6. It's interesting. This one, you'd think this one was a very clear 6. It actually confuses this with a 5 there. I think this break right here, here. So it says it thinks it could be a 5. And it could be a 0, but it's not very sure. You can see the top, it lists the top 3 picks for this here, for this. And again, this it thinks is a 7, but it's really a 2. So it hasn't learned that very well. And this, it thinks it's a 9, but it's actually a 4. And so again, we will then, every filter has these values in it. And we are learning, these are the weights in our neural connection, and we are learning those and adjusting them over time. So if we keep running this, it will keep updating our weights, tweaking the features and the neural networks, and getting better and better, hopefully, at recognizing these. So we'll do this minced one in just a sec in our code. There's another version. This is the CIFAR 10, which is the well-known data set. And that's recognizing images of objects like cats and dogs and giraffes or something like that, and trying to categorize it. And again, here we're doing a little bigger network here. But again, and we're trying to learn, it's learning this network, and it's trying to predict, is this a horse? And right now it thinks that's a car or an airplane. So again, before it's learned very well, it sees this white horse and it says, I think that's a car, could be an airplane, could be a cat. But to us, it's obviously, I mean, to me, it looks like a horse. But it's okay. It's like knows that's a plane, knows it thinks that's a truck. There. This airplane thinks it could be a dog or a cat or a horse. But again, as we train it, it learns more and more features, it'll get better at this. So, and you can kind of look through and see the, it's trying to show you at each layer that it's detecting different features in different areas. And then we're shrinking, we're doing a pooling layer, things are getting smaller here and then smaller yet as we go for this. I just like these visualizations because it's trying to show you real images and how it's detecting features in these real images.
How does it work on rotating? Like if an image is rotated 100 degrees.
Right. It depends on how it was trained on it. So like, let's say we're doing cat and dog pictures and you send an image of an upside dog cat or an upside dog. It will often not do very well if it's not been trained on those stuff. So the question is again, has it been trained on those or not there? So one thing we do sometimes in our training is we can, inside our training, we can just say, flip all the images, rotate them so it sees all the images in different areas. Also flip left to right there. So the systems are automatically trained. So if you want to train them that way, you can. And it's interesting. Sometimes it's more important, like cats and dogs, you often see a picture of a dog laying on its back and its head's upside down. So you would want to do that. But like we'll do whale tails, humpback whale tails. And those are pretty, I mean, the water's there and the tail there. It's pretty obvious what direction it is, and that's important. So we generally don't flip those over.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So again, it kind of depends on where you're coming from. Okay. Here's so again, Wikipedia has a pretty okay article talking about these convolutional neural networks and talks about these structures there, the initial structures here. I actually I put in a little longer thing. I just asked ChatGPT for a history of some of these neural networks. I told you we were going to get to neural networks with more parameters. So we're going to see that right now. So the LeNet from 1990s here. So this is the fifth one, his final one, and it had 60,000 parameters. And again, it was trained on the MINTS data set. So we'll do that today. And again, this is 50,000 parameters. And again, should take just a few minutes. And we'll train it today in class. We'll see how long it should take. So should we train this in modern hardware? We have these cutting edge computers on our desks here in a couple minutes. The next, like in 2012, AlexNet was working on these next set of images from something called ImageNet, what we'll see. And they're up to 60 million parameters here. And again, that's taking maybe a few days. VGGNet, we're up to 138 million parameters. There's two different versions. There's one with 16 layers and one with 19 layers. But this is up to over 100 million parameters on this. 4 years ago, we were doing VGGNet because again, it was still pretty recent back then, 4 or 5 years ago. Students were doing this in class on campus here. And we would train, and it says, It will take, with today's hardware, it takes several days. Yeah, it used to take us, I'd have students, we did summer research and they would come in and start it up and they'd check it 3 days later. So we had a computer up in our lab that was just running all summer long on training this. It's just, I mean, it was just so disappointing because you'd set up these parameters, you'd run it, you'd wait 3 days, you'd check, and it wouldn't do very well. And you'd change the parameters, try it again and run it for 3 days and see if it worked out there. So again, it takes a long time to train, and we were, trying to experiment with different settings and different setups for these stuff here. Google Net, one of Google's first big forays into this was 2014. They had something called Inception. There's different versions, but again, this was 16 million parameter, no, 6 million parameters here. ResNet, again, 2015, 25 million parameters. So again, that's 25 million weights that are features and stuff that it can train. So in order to train that, you need a huge data set for this. And a lot of these were trained on this ImageNet data set. I don't have a link in here. Let me just pop up a link to show you what ImageNet is. So again, this is, I thought they had a view of it here. So yeah. But this is a huge data set that's out there that you can do. Yeah, maybe if I go to the Kaggle challenge version of it. So again, that's these pictures like this. And we're trying to, originally, we were just trying to recognize that these are bananas, or this was a, I don't know what type of animal that was. That, I don't know what that is. So they're saying foxes. I'm not sure that is a fox. It's not it's not a red fox. So, here. And so it can also be used not just to recognize that this is bananas, but to draw bounding boxes around this. And we'll look at that later on. It's all that stuff. But we're just basically looking at classification now. Okay, so again, we're getting into some large networks and on that's what I'm trying to set up. The next project you do will be probably one of the slowest we train on. It's going to take hours and hours to train on this. I'm shrinking the data down to try to make it reasonable for you to train this stuff. But it's still going to take us hours and hours to train this. So where do we use this? A lot of stuff that you take for granted probably nowadays, image colorization, taking black and white images, colorizing it, that sort of stuff. Self-driving cars, this whole identification stuff. Let's talk about that. So we'll get into self-driving cars and robots and stuff, but part of these systems are generally a CNN, a convolutional neural network here, that's taking input from the cameras. And again, they're showing these convolutional layers, max pooling layers, convolutional layers, and then a flattening layers at the end with these dense layers here. So this is kind of a normal convolutional neural network stuff. And the idea is we want to be able to identify these areas. Oh, maybe it's in this video. You may have seen these where you're seeing a street view of the camera and it's drawing boxes around pedestrians and cars and things and identifying them. And that's what these things are generally doing, is trying to identify that. Today, this next generation of household robots, which will probably be coming out in a couple years, are again going through the same thing, going around your house and be able to look at the camera view and identify that's a dish, that's a plant, that's a cat, and know what to water and what to pick up and put in the dishwasher and make sure it's not putting the cat in the dishwasher and stuff like that. So. Not for all cats. Sorry, I've had some really bad cats in my life. Oh. You just wash the cat up a little. All right, so. I almost deleted this 2016 White House thing on the future of AI and stuff. It's old, but then I thought you might want to just watch this because it's so out of date, saying what we were thinking about in 2016 about the future of AI. So, okay, we're going to go into this convolutional neural networks notebook. This is the last thing we're going to do today is open up this notebook. So again, go down to the bottom right before this big box of history stuff. Click on this convolutional neural networks. Oh, I have the link wrong, I think. Oh, maybe it's just making me log in. See if you can open that up. I have to verify my identity. Okay. So we're just going to walk through some code for a neural network to see how we set up a convolutional neural network with the simple minced stuff here. So yeah, it looks like anyone can access it. Okay. So again, similar as we've seen before, we import our libraries first. And now we're bringing in more layers into Keras besides dense. We have dropout, but also this convolutional layers. It's using max pooling layers, a flattening layer, stuff like that. And we bring in our data. We're bringing in our minced, our digit recognition data for this. And then we are setting this up so we can work with it. Now, before we kind of took these images and flattened them all out ahead of time, now we're leaving them in image format. So our data that we're feeding in are 28 by 28 by 1. So 28 pixels by 28 pixels by 1 pixel in depth here. If this were color, it would be like 28 by 28 by 3. Here, but these are just grayscale images. And this is the size of them. These are small images, just 28 pixels. So we're bringing these in here. And now we're setting up our convolutional neural networks, our layers here. And let's look at the code for that. So we're defining a sequential network and we're going to add layers to it. So we're calling it NN. We're saying NN add, and our first layer is just an input layer, which are taking our images. And then again, this is our image 28 by 28 by 1. That's our input shape for this. And now we're adding we do a convolutional layer, and another convolutional layer, and then a max pooling layer. And again, the ordering that you might, like how many convolutional layers, how many max pooling layers, we're guessing here. But again, where you think of the brain features, we start with lots with big areas, and we make that will make them smaller as we go. So now you can specify like 8. These are 8 features, and our kernel is 3 by 3. Our activation is rectified linear unit. Padding is set to the same. So that will make the output image the same size as the input image. I'm not sure, but it'll pad something around the image. So the size, it'll end up, it'd be 28 by 28 pixels as a result. We won't lose anything. We'll add some padding. Now we can kind of shorten this out. So often we'll just say 8 different features, 3 by 3 kernel. Activation is padding here. Now, one thing we will watch is that when we run this and we print off the summary, it'll show us So we start with 28 by 28 by 1. Then soon we have 28 by 28 by 8 different features here. Then we have another 28 by 28 by 8. Now we're going to shrink it down to 14 by 14 by 8. So this max pooling, this is how we do a max pooling layer. We say max pooling 2D, the pool size is 2 by 2. The stride is, all these have a stride that's default. So in this case, the stride is 2. So it'll shrink it down from 28 by 28 to 14 by 14. And then we want to often detect more features there. So at the next layer, we're going to detect 16 types of features. And then we're going to do max pooling again. And now we're going to do 32 features and do max pooling again, and then back to 16 features and then max pooling again. I don't know why we switched. So we went from 28 by 28 size image down to a 14 by 14 image, down to a 7 by 7 image, down to a 3 by 3 image, down to a 1 by 1 image. It's a really small image. There's 16 features, but that's a really small image. That's probably not going to work very well. Okay. Then we flatten this out and we do 2 dense layers, one with 32 and one with 10, and our output is 10. So that's here we're doing a max pooling, we're doing a flatten, a dense layer with 32, and our final dense layer is just our output size. And again, with our outputs, we apply this thing called softmax, which kind of averages it so that it turns out to be a percent. If there are 10 outputs, they all add up to 1%, or yeah, to 1 here. So you can read the outputs kind of as a percent. It's an averaging kind of technique. Okay, so here we've got almost 12,000, 11,900 parameters here. We're going to set up some callbacks here, and we're going to train the neural network for 10 epochs. Oops, I don't think I actually ran that code. I run that code on this. Now I'll run this. It should train this pretty fast because there's not many nodes on this. I mean, not that many parameters on this. I can watch my accuracy. Started, I got to 80 pretty fast. Now I'm up to 97, 98%. So we did these Mint stuff last week. With normal neural networks, convolutional neural networks can actually do them even better, to have better results. Again, we get up to about 98. Well, we should hit about 99% accuracy on these by the time we're done. And we're only training this for 10 units or 10 epochs. %. Again, we can kind of look at our history. We can see we're still actually, we could train a little longer. We're still, it seems like improving, although our validation accuracy isn't that much better. But our loss is getting pretty low. We're not learning that much at the end. And again, we can go up here and change these neural networks and try different things. So one of the questions is, how many filters should you have at each level? Should you, one common thing is to have like 2 convolutional layers and then a max pooling layer. So is that better to do that? Have 2 convolutional layers and a max pooling layer? Would that be a good way of setting? Would that be more accuracy? Because we're only 99% accuracy. the post office is not gonna pay you for 99% accuracy. You're gonna need to get to 99.8% accuracy before the post office will sign off on your payment, or at least back in the day, here. And again, we often did more, features. So we might start with 8 filters, 16, 32, we might end up with 64 here. I don't like when our images get too small here. So I think our images are getting too small. I don't want to do this last max pooling here. I'm going to comment that out and leave ourselves at a 3x3 image. And I think, we could increase this to be like 64 images or filters here. I think that would be a better result. So again, you can play with different structures here. This one now has 92,000 parameters, more parameters here for this. And it'll train a little slower for this. So this week and next week, this is a lot. What we'll be doing is we'll get a data set. We'll look at different structures of these neural networks. Now, how many layers does this have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 layers there. So we'll start using neural networks next week like this that'll have like 50 different layers. And so rather than having to find all those, we'll just be able to import them and say, bring in this standard convolutional neural network structure. And we'll just add some layers to it, but we'll have a base to start with rather than having to define 100 layers. Here. We are training this one from scratch. And again, it's a very small network with very small images, 28 by 28 pixels. Next week, we'll be doing bigger images, not huge, but bigger, like 512 by 512 pixels here. And we'll try to do that. In order to manage that, we will bring in saved weights. Companies have trained these things on large weight, companies with lots of compute power out there have done this for us. We can then just take their weights, bring them into our network and modify them. So we'll bring in starting weights and then we can decide how we want to modify those starting weights for this. So now I'm ended up here. My accuracy was 99, almost 99.7 here, and my validation accuracy was up again to 99.1 here. But again, if I ran training, I would generally run this training for 100 epochs with early stopping just to see how long it went here. And do that. Questions on convolutional neural networks? Is that a good start today? So again, your job, again, I'd suggest watch the MIT video, and then you can pick one of these training options under the Explore activities. Like Google has an introduction, Kaggle has an introduction to computer vision, Amazon does. Pick one of those and go through those tutorials also. And then Thursday, I'll have the learning notebook updated and we'll be doing that. Sound good? See you on Thursday. You are.
My best was 53%, but to make up for it, I only have 1% accuracy on this.
That's not so good.
10%.
10%. Yeah. So.
Research work. So I tried doing the high dynamic and I
Yeah.
wanted to know, are we just using this article?
No, you can find new
Other
articles.
sources.
Yeah, right. If you Google or look for that, there should be other resources on. That's just an example.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Right.
I think I can do awesome. Watching it,